Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we Masechtas Chagigah daf Ches. We are going to begin on Ches Amud Aleph, the second line from the top. So our Mishnah said on the previous daf that when it comes to an Ola offering, it's necessary that it has to come from Chulin money, based on the principle the whole davar shebachova eino ba element of Chulin, as opposed to the Shalmei Simcha, in which a person is able to use even Meiser money for that. However, the dispute happens to be between Beis Shammai and Hillel regarding when it comes to the Shalmei Chagigah. And it says that when it comes to the Chagigah's Yom Tov Rishon, on the first day, specifically it says a Pesach, but it really is any holiday. So that's where the machlokas is. The reason why it said Pesach, as we concluded, was because when you're Mechalek, we make a distinction between the 15th day and the 14th. Sometimes, as Rashi explains, when you're part of a very large chabura in which the Korban Pesach, in just eating that, will not be al sava, it will not be with satiation. Therefore, you also have to bring a Chagigah on Yudal, on the 14th, on Erev Pesach. That carbon, for sure, even according to the Shita Beis Shammai, is considered to be not a davar shebachova, and therefore, for that reason, you can bring it from Mai. So let's continue. Omer Mar. Now, Beis Hillel oimrim min hamaiser. Beis Hillel says when it comes to the Chagigah, the Shalmei Chagigah on the 15th, you can even use meiser. Now, the question is, amai davar shebachaybahu v'chol davar shebachayba eino ba'olam mechulin? It's hard to understand. How could he possibly say that this carbon, which you must bring, just like the Ols Re'i you have to bring, it has to come from Chulin, so too should be by the Shalmei Chagigah. So Amar Ula b'toifel. He says that it doesn't mean you can just use all the money from Meiser money, but you could min ha-toifel. What toifel? What does toifel mean? It means, as we're going to see in Rashi, that it's in addition to the chol money that you use, that you're mechaber Meiser ima chulin, or mevi, u'pli gamaroi ketza toiflin. There's going to be exactly a question, how do you do this? But it doesn't mean that you use only Meiser money. Even Beis Hillel says you can't do that because of the davar shebachova when it comes to the Shalmei Chagigah. Coming to tell you that you can be toifel, you could combine the two. We'll discuss what that means soon. Now Chizki armor toifel and behema. You can do this an animal to an animal. Toiflin mois l'mois, but not money. Rabbi Yochanan oimer toiflin mois l'mos, ain't toiflin behema. So they argue how exactly this can be done. So first of all, as Rashi says, you can do behema to a behema. If you have a lot of food, and you do not have, it's not enough. Behema achas, with one animal, yavi achas l'chagiga min achulin v'shar min meiser. You can take one animal you could purchase with Chulin money, and then the rest with Meiser money. Even though this is on the first day of Pesach, and Yom Tov, Shem Chagigah Lehen. All you need to do is at least bring one Shalmei Chagigah, and therefore, since that came from Chulin, you can now bring another animal this way. However, he does not allow you to be Toifel Mois Lamos. In other words, to purchase a larger animal. So you had enough money maybe to buy a small animal, but that's not enough. So therefore you buy a much larger animal. So to use some of the Chulin and Meiser money, that is something according to him he says you can't do. According to Yochanan, he says the opposite. You're allowed to do Mois l'mois, but not Behem l'behema. Okay. But Tanakabas the Chizki, Tanakabas the Rabbi Yochanan. So we have braces which support both shitas. So it says like this: Tanakabas Rav Yochanan. The pasuk says mitzas, that a person who is literally taxed. So we learn over here that a person is able to bring their obligations. They are allowed to do this with chulin. Says Rashi, b'shvuos ksiv yasisachag shvuos laHashem Elokecha mitzas nidvas yadcha l'kam mafarish mitzas lashon chulin. So we're going to see that this is a language of Chulin, that it can be done in this way. And therefore, this is, as we're going to see, is going to be in support of the Shita of Rav Yochanan. Now, Rav Yochanan says the way that it's Toiflin Behema, Rav Yochanan says Toiflin Mois L'mois. That's how it's supposed to be done. If a person is able to mix it together with other money. So you can be Taifel Moisel Mois. So therefore we see beferish that a person is able to be Taifel Moisel Mois. Same thing. Yom Rishon Shal Min. On the first day, it has to come from chulin money. However, after the first day, then it can come from meiser. The first eating comes from chulin. For the rest of the times of Pesach, but meiser behema. A person is able to use meiser money. It's only on the first day, which is l'shem the Shalmei Chagigah, the 15th, that it must come from chulin. And according to Beis Shammai, Rashi says, he holds Beis Shammai strict. He says you cannot mix the monies. However, when it comes to the days afterwards, one is able to do it. It's only when it comes to the Chil Rishayna. Now, B'Yom Tov, my time, how come on the first day we don't allow it? So Rav Ashi, because Dilma Asil Asuri B'Yom Tov. The concern is you may end up taking Meiser on Yom Tov. The Eshel Asa B'Yom Tov Mishum Sikarta. So interestingly enough, when it comes to Meiser Behema, one of the problems of doing Meiser Behema is in order to be able to recognize that this is the 10th animal that's coming out of your flock, is you make a mark, and that's an issue of being Tzaveya. You're not allowed to dye an animal. Says Rashi Chitzavoy Ditnad B'Bechiris Hayetzi B'Asiri Sarka B'Sikra. You put this coloring on it. B'Yamar Hari's a Meiser. Vutseva Edaim, it's red. Shitzayvin Bo Teresen. Okay. So anyway, this is what was done. So the problem is you're not allowed to dye on Yom Tov. So my Masha Haimitzas Lishan Dechol Hu Dechsev V'Yosem Hamelch HaChashverosh Mas Al Haaretz. So we know at the very, very end in Megillas Esther, the last parak, the first pasuk there, is only 3 pesukim, it says that he put a mas, a tax, on the land. So mitzas is a language of taxing. And tax, we know, comes from chulin money. You can't pay taxes with meiser money. Okay, fine. Now the Rambam says that you could be yotzei the Shalmei Chagigah with a meiser behema, but you can't do it on Yom Tov, since you might come to take it off on Yom Tov. The Ravid asks on this. He says, but it's a chayiv to bring the Chagigah, so you should only be allowed to take from chulin money. I and the Rambam. Okay, weiter. Yisrael yotzei nidei chavasam in the dharma de davos. When it comes to the Shalmei Simcha, on the other hand, that is something which you can use almost anything, with 2 exceptions, as the Mishnah said, which we'll get into. You can bring anything to bring joy. You can all these different animals that you bring for a neder and a dava, or the 10th animal, meiser behema, so you're able to eat that, and you'll have fulfilled your obligation of Simchas Yom Tov. Fine. Fine. By the way, Taisus, by the way, when it says Mishum Sikarta, he asks the question, typically the Ein Mekadsh and Yom Tov. We generally are not Mekadosh on Yom Tov something. Ayin Taisus. Okay, so that's in Yisrael. But Kahanim, B'chatas, V'ashim, V'char, B'chaz V'shaik, they can use any of these things, these various portions that they receive from these animals, they're able to use it as their Shalmei Simcha. The you would think you can also use bird offerings, like the chatas, not oisaf is burnt, the chatas of, or the flower offering. You're supposed to rejoice in your holiday. Now, in this, as we continue to Chesed Beis, Mi Chagigah ba mehen, only something in which the carbon comes from it. Yatsa elush in Chagigah ba mehen, says Rashi. De Chagigah cheluk sivbe. It says that you have fats, and it says explicitly, "Lo yon chel chagi ad boiker." So therefore, even though maybe you love eating flour and you love eating chicken, but there's no chelev, and the pasuk which talks about the whole notion of the samachta, it specifically mentions chelev, and therefore you cannot fulfill your obligation when it comes to Simchas Yom Tov by using flour, the mincha or the oaf. Rav Ashi Omer Mivasamachta. The fact that it says you should rejoice, nafka. Yotzu elu she'en behen simcha. We exclude these things in which they do not give joy. Rav Ashi Hai b'chagecha mayavidle. Hahul Rav Daniel Bar Katina. Rav Daniel Bar Katina. Omer Rav Menayin she'en nois nashim b'mayid. How do we know we don't marry women on the mayid, which Yom Tov, etc.? Shenemar b'samachta b'chagecha b'chagecha v'lo b'ishtacha. So this we actually saw in Masechtas Moed Katan about not too long ago in Daf Ches. Interesting, the same Daf. You can see Chesim and Beis, exactly the same. So v'samachta b'chagecha, we learn out v'samachta b'chagecha and not your wife. So therefore, also the Gemara brings down there's 4 tiruts in the Gemara over there. Says one is in Marvin Simcha. Fine, look at this Taisus. It says typically the mapigla midrasha v'samachta b'chagecha misha Chagigah. Yeshlomet tevayu shamina mina dolechsiv chag umihu metzina lomemer depolgil hevloi mashmalei v'hod ein noisa nashim b'mayid moki taima ki idach tahasan. There's other explanations as we said before. Okay, let's see. Question 5. Ha'im mikayamin mitzvahs v'samachta b'chagecha basar oif u'ma'atam. So he said no, you're not fulfilling it, and he says either because v'samachta b'chagecha, and chagecha has to do with the carbon Chagigah, and the Chagigah, the shalmei Chagigah, it says it has chalav, has fat in it. So therefore, because of it excludes something which is not fit for this offering, which would be flour or a bird. Alternatively, probably the more famous answer, I should say, she'en behem simcha. There's not the same element of joy. Obviously, you have to think about what do you mean? What if a person enjoys chicken more than meat? Why does basar specifically give a person more joy? So that's something certainly one needs to think about and contemplate. Next Mishnah. Let's say a person has a lot, many people to feed, but nechasim muatim, but they don't have a whole lot of money. So what do? So maybe shlomim merubim v'oilos muatos. So they should bring as many shlomim, or a high majority of it, and they'll be able to eat from the shalmei Chagigah. However, the olos re'iyah, which is completely consumed in the mizbeach, you should only do a small amount. Nechasim merubim v'oichem muatim. Let's say you have a lot of money, but you don't have a lot of people to feed. So then do the opposite. Maybe oilos merubois or shlomim muatim. So then bring a lot of karbanos olah. Zev zemut. If a person doesn't have a lot of either, al zen nemar mo kesef shtei kesef. On this we had the machlokes b'Shamei Hillel do the minimum. Zev ze marubin al zen nemar ish kamat nesyadik v'chazach v'chachadais asher nasan lach. Person has a lot of people, a lot of money. So then you should do as much as you want and do make it beautiful. Now shlomim marubin, it says if you have a lot of people, so you should bring a lot of shlomim because you don't have a lot of money. So the question is, how are you going to buy all these shlomim? Halesle, we just said he has no money. That's fine, but it sounds like a great advice, but this person doesn't have money to buy it. So Rav Chisda, teifel umevi par gadol. You can mix it together with the chulin and the meiser money, and you can bring a large animal, which again means taifun behema behema. Amar Ravashi hari amr taifun behema behema. So my karmer leile mahachi karmer le hari amru taifun behema behema avol loy meisel mais. Maybe what he's coming to say is this is the only way you could do this, but not meisel mais. But if that's the case, lamely ain taifun meisel mos. Why did he say it more specifically? El hachi amrle hari amru af taifun behema behema. So come on, Rav Yochanan. This shita doesn't sound like either one because Chizki and Rav Yochanan, they said you can either do one, but not you can either do one or the other. You can't do both. So they argue. So again, this is a third sheet that you can be teifel either way. You either use a bigger behema or you can have a separate, different animal. So masnisa lo pligi. It says that the first achila comes from chulin money. My achila rishayna. What does that mean? It means shir demei achila rishonim and chulin. It means the measurement of demei achila is supposed to come from chulin. So again, this doesn't necessarily infer mois because or achila because it doesn't mean achila rishonim, like your first carbon, but it could just simply mean the value, which is mois. Amar ulam rish lakish. Here for sheser behemos l'chigasoi. Let's say a person is mafresh 10 animals as a shalmei chagigah. Hikriv chamish b'yom tov rishon, makriv 5 on the first day. V'chayzo makriv chamish b'yom tov sheni. And then go ahead and bring another 5 on another day. Rav Yochanan Amar kivan shepasak. Once you stop, shuv inu makriv. That's it. You don't continue. Amar Rav Abba v'loi pligi. Kan b'stam, kan b'mfarish. One is if you were explicit in your words. One is where you did not explain. So Rashi says, "Stam im hefrishon stam ein chayzer makriven." If let's say you didn't explain, so in that case you should only continue to just do those. Once you stop, that's it. However, says Rashi, "Kan b'mafarish yomer behedil yom rishon ani mafarish es kulon." I'm going to bring all of them. Chayzer makriven, so you can continue bringing them. Sheinu ela tashlumi rishon. So it's considered like a tashlumin for the first. So therefore, that is the explanation. Looking at Rabbi Gibber's test. Question 23. But my nechu Rabbi Yochanan v'reish lakish b'mafresh eser behemus chigaso v'hikriv chamish b'yom tov rishon im yochel hakriv hashar b'yom tov sheni. I wrote nothing. They all agree. Kan mafarish that you could do it, kan b'stam that you can't. Okay. Weiter. Fine. Kan mafarish, kan b'stam. V'lo pligi. Now, hi stam heichidami. What exactly does it mean? You don't specify that you can't do it. So let's say you have 10 animals. You maybe want to bring all 10, but there's just not enough time. It has to be done in the day. So hi delay akrivuhu delay kashois biyom. The only reason why you couldn't do it is just because there wasn't any time in the day. It says Rashi mastama liyom rishon hefrishon. It's pretty clear you might obviously were mafresh for that first day, but you couldn't continue. So therefore, it should work. The elo delay slay oichlin. It means that you had no one to eat it. So hi delay akrivuhu delay slay oichlin. So that should be the reason. Really, there was plenty of time to be makriv it, the islay oichlin, and you had people to eat it. So the fact, mivid de mikama, on the first day, lo akrivinhu, you chose not to be makriv, you stopped, even though you had time. Shmamina shir sharinu. It's clear that you were leaving them over for another day, and therefore, and that's something which we say, you're not allowed to do. If depending again, if it was stopped, shehibadaita lachay shnei yomim. The hachinam mistaber. The chiyasa rav and Rabbi Yochanan hifresh as behemos lechiyaso. Hikrav chamish biyam to rishon. Chayizer makrav chamish biyam to sheni. You could do it. I kashana dadi Allah shmamina kan stam kan mufarish shmamina. So again, we see this distinction. Itmar nam. We also learn Omer Rav Shimon bar Abba Imar Rabbi Yochanan as we continue with Testament Aleph. Lo shanu, says Rashi. Hadisanu kaman. Only this, but not more. If the day didn't finish. If let's say the day finished and didn't have enough time, then it's fine. So my gomer, if you finish bringing your karbanos, my makriv. What do you mean? You finished. So what do you mean you can be makriv again? The day wasn't complete. If the day was complete, it's clear that you really wanted to be makriv all 10, but just you didn't have any time, you couldn't finish your job, and therefore that's when we say it's a tashlumin for the rishon, and that's when it will work. So it's almost like it's mefarish, that if you specify, then we say it works. However, stam, it will not work. You wouldn't be able to be makriv if you're mafsik when there's shois b'yom. If there's no shois b'yom, then a person is able to be makriv. We'll stop there because we have to a Mishnah. Let's see a couple more questions. Question 6. The one who says, which is not Beis Shammai, that you can teifel, Ha'im hayinu behema or moisel mois. So this is actually a three-way machlokas. Okay, so according to, as we saw, this is Chesamad Beis, but it's also Chesamad Aleph. So Chizki, the machlokas on the top actually, teifel. Chizki Omer Teiflin Behemel Behema Ve'ein Teiflin Moisel Mois. Rabbi Yochanan says Teiflin Moisel Mos Ve'ein Teiflin Behemel Behema. But again, of course, this is two shitas, and then on the Amud Beis we also have the third shita of Rav Sheshes Bein Behema Bein B'Mois. You can do it for both. Question 7. This Gemara is 30 years old. I have to be careful so it doesn't get ripped. Hifresh eser behemos chigasai hikrib chamish miyamtiv rishon im chayzu makrav chamish miyamtiv sheni. So he says like this: Imo haylo shois, if there's no time left. O shipirish, you specified al hasar shehem liyoim rishon makrav sheni. Vim stam tafrishin vahavi shois beyoim ein makrav sheni. So therefore, again, it's totally on those things. If a person has time, then you cannot, and you just chose to stop, then that's it. However, if let's say there was no time or you specified, then we say a person is able to do so. TA 26. Be'elu karbanos ein adam yotze de chavaso v'samach simchas hasamach b'chag. So he said birds and flower offerings. Fine. TB 27. Chagigas yomtov. Beisil armir min meiser. Gemara Moikila b'toifel, Mahaboyer toifel. 2 answers. So he says, O shemevi kama behemos achas mehen menachulin, or shiyaba behema gedoyla, big animal, mamais chulin umaiser adkan.